The inheritance will all go to my mistress, and I won't give you a single penny. The sharp sound of my husband slamming the table echoed through the room, and my body stiffened instantly. In the silence, the sound of my trembling breath could be heard. I've rewritten the will, so you'll get nothing. You don't even have the right to complain. He straightened the collar of his expensive suit and looked down at me as if I were trash. The documents on the desk, the inheritance papers, and the rewritten will spelled out my fate coldly. Suddenly, he swept the documents off the desk with his hand, scattering them across the floor. He stomped on them deliberately, crumpling the papers underfoot. Pack your things and get out. Don't ever come back. At that moment, the sound of the front door opening interrupted us. A woman with golden hair and a revealing outfit that accentuated her curves, and the sweet scent of a luxury perfume, sauntered confidently into the living room. Oh, you're still here. Hurry up and leave. There's no place for you here anymore. She walked up to me, her gaze scanning me from head to toe, her lips curled in a smug smile. Is this the kind of drab outfit a housewife wears? No wonder your husband got tired of you. My husband laughed loudly at her words and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. He didn't even glance at me, his wife of 10 years. The look he gave her was sweet, like he was gazing at his first love. The family I had spent a decade building came crashing down before my eyes. While my husband worked, I juggled day and night jobs to support the household. I sacrificed weekends for temp work, and if he came home late, I reheated his dinner to ensure it was warm. I wondered if I could have avoided this ending if I had put my husband first. But the smile he gave her mirrored the fake kindness he once showed me. How much of my life was a lie? For 10 years, I had silently endured. My husband was trying to take everything from me. But I decided it was time to end this. Quietly, I stood up, ready to release the part of me I had suppressed for so long. He doesn't know the truth I hold in my hands. My name is Amy White. I'm 37 years old, and I was supposed to be an ordinary housewife. On the day we married, I felt like I was living a dream. I vividly remember his brother Michael hesitating to congratulate us. At the time, I thought it was just sibling awkwardness. Looking back now, Michael must have known his brother's true nature. Maybe he even foresaw the hell I was walking into. About a year into our marriage, Andrew's true nature began to surface. He would flip over dinners I had made, or yell at me for voicing even the smallest opinion. At first, I thought his behavior was just stress from work. But as the days went by, his temper worsened, and his treatment of me became more severe. His mother had always told him he was special, raising him with unrealistic expectations. He had a fragile ego, with no achievements to back it up. I realized this about 3 years into our marriage when a new, merit-based CEO was appointed at his company. Andrew believed he was destined to be promoted to manager, but the position went to someone else. From that day on, his treatment of me deteriorated further. Losing his professional pride, he tried to compensate by controlling me at home. His sharp words and aggressive behavior masked deep humiliation and a need to dominate. Around that time, I started a small online jewelry shop from home. What began as a hobby grew into a thriving business. My monthly sales now exceed $10,000, and I've built a secure financial foundation. Andrew, however, dismissed it as a mere side job. He doesn't know that I've been transferring most of the income into a separate account. I wanted to be ready to leave if I ever needed to. But I hated myself for still clinging to this marriage, enduring this abuse, and hoping he might change. Occasionally, he'd become violent, and I bore the bruises in silence. I convinced myself I had no choice but to endure. Then came Claire, his mistress, who drove the final nail into my heart. Claire was the fourth mistress I knew of, each one a temporary distraction for Andrew to mask his failures. But Claire was different. Her presence felt like a direct attack on my dignity. Once, I came home unexpectedly and found her casually chatting with Andrew in our kitchen, holding a wine glass. She called him Andy, with an annoying familiarity, her perfume overpowering the room. Oh, you're back. Andrew didn't even try to explain, instead shrugging and saying, She just came by. It's no big deal. His smug expression that day etched itself into my memory. That night, I lay awake, reliving the humiliation over and over. Each time I tried to confront him, his dismissive attitude or anger silenced me. I felt trapped, powerless, and utterly alone. A few weeks ago, during a visit to my parents, my mother revealed something that shook me to my core. She told me that my father had been abusive during my childhood. She had endured years of violence, unable to leave because of financial dependency. Her confession stirred a cold anger within me. Was I destined to repeat her mistakes? I didn't want to live like this anymore. The first time Andrew hit me, I wanted to believe it was a one-time mistake. When he apologized with tears, I desperately clung to the hope that he was sincere. But the cycle of violence and apologies continued, each time chipping away at my trust. I resolved to fight back, quietly preparing for my escape. I played the role of the submissive wife while secretly documenting every instance of his abuse. My jewelry business became my lifeline. Late at night, I took online English lessons to expand my market internationally. Andrew, oblivious to my efforts, dismissed my work as insignificant. But that was fine. I didn't want him to know I was building my independence. One day, Claire came over again, flaunting her presence as if she belonged there. She was no longer just Andrew's mistress. She'd become an embodiment of the contempt he held for me. You know, Amy, unlike you, I'm a real woman. It must be miserable to be you. She leaned in close to whisper the words with a cruel smirk. Normally, I would have ignored her taunts and waited for the moment to pass. But this time, I couldn't. When I glanced at Andrew standing behind her, grinning at our exchange, something inside me snapped. For the first time in years, I found my voice. Who do you think you're calling miserable? My words came out stronger than I expected, and Claire froze, her smirk vanishing. In retaliation, she swiped her hand across the counter, sending the dinner I had prepared crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking plates filled the kitchen, and food scattered across the floor. Andrew rushed to her side theatrically. Are you okay? He then turned to me, shoving me hard enough to make me stumble. As I lay on the floor, Claire laughed coldly while they both looked down on me. But as I stared back at them, I felt no pain, only a burning resolve. That night, I contacted a lawyer. It was time to prepare for more than just leaving the house. I needed legal protection against Andrew and Claire. Over the next few days, I maintained my usual facade of calmness while meticulously planning every step of my escape. My jewelry business, which Andrew still saw as a trivial hobby, continued to thrive. It had become my lifeline, my ticket to freedom. Meanwhile, Claire's taunts persisted, but they no longer fazed me. With every insult, my determination grew stronger. One evening, Andrew came home, finding me and Claire alone in the house. She lounged on the sofa, idly scrolling through her phone. Andrew sighed dramatically as he collapsed into the chair. Andy, are you okay? She leaned in, feigning concern, but I could see her calculation. I've got only a month left to live. His words were so abrupt that I couldn't stop myself from looking up. What? Claire gasped, covering her mouth in surprise. When I looked at Andrew, I saw the faintest hint of smugness beneath his expression of false sorrow. What are you talking about? I asked, keeping my voice even. You wouldn't understand. He dismissed me coldly before turning back to Claire, who now had her hands on his shoulders. Don't worry, I'm here for you. The sight was nauseatingly theatrical. I knew it was a lie. Months ago, I had found his health checkup report. There were no signs of illness, let alone a terminal condition. I let them play out their charade, silently watching as they pretended to comfort each other. But inside, my resolve hardened. This wouldn't be the last act in their pitiful drama. A few days later, I visited Andrew's brother Michael at his law firm to finalize the next steps. Are you ready to move forward? Yes, I've made my decision. Michael nodded with understanding. The paperwork is ready. We can proceed whenever you're ready. His steady words gave me hope. Finally, I could see freedom on the horizon. The next morning, I faced Andrew and Claire in the living room. I can't do this anymore. I'm divorcing you. Andrew's expression turned blank, his mouth opening and closing as if he couldn't process my words. You can't survive on your own, Amy. How do you plan to live without Andy? Her mocking laugh echoed in the room, but I remained calm. Their petty insults couldn't reach me anymore. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against their jeers. I'm not your wife or your family anymore. You didn't even tell me about this supposed illness. You dragged me into your lies about dying, expecting me to just go along with it. My words froze them both. What kind of wife doesn't even know about her husband's health? You're more like a maid than a spouse. I ignored her, grabbed my bag, and silently left the house. I went straight to the luxury apartment I had secured months ago. Everything was ready. The furniture, the documents, the savings I had painstakingly set aside. For the first time in a decade, I felt unburdened. I no longer needed anyone's permission or validation. Over the next few days, Andrew called incessantly. He complained that the house was falling apart, that Claire couldn't manage even basic chores. Amy, what kind of woman leaves her husband with someone like Claire? His voice roared through the phone, but I felt nothing. I'm not your wife anymore, Andrew. Whatever happens to your house isn't my problem. His angry tone faltered, and then he tried a different tactic. Okay, I'll give you a quarter of the inheritance. Just come back. I couldn't help but laugh quietly. Is that so? Before I could say more, Claire's shrill voice interrupted in the background. What do you mean? You said I'd get everything. I could hear Andrew snapping at her to be quiet. Please, Amy, I'm sorry, I'll change. Just come back. His voice, once so commanding, now sounded small and pathetic. But I had no sympathy. A week later, I met them at a cafe, ready to put everything to rest. They sat opposite me, their faces tense and expectant. I pulled out a series of envelopes and laid them on the table. First, this is your health report, Andrew. I slid it across to him, watching as his face paled. You're perfectly fine. There's no terminal illness. Claire's face froze as she stared at the report. Next, I handed Claire another envelope. These are photos of you with other men. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing surveillance photos and hotel footage. You thought I didn't know. She was too stunned to respond. Finally, I handed Andrew the last envelope. This is about the inheritance you've been bragging about. He opened it with shaking hands, only to find proof that the money wasn't his to begin with. The 1 billion yen belongs to your brother Michael. Your father left it to him, not you. Andrew's face twisted in shock as he realized what he had lost. Claire looked at him with disbelief, her confidence shattered. You even signed away any claim to it without reading the documents. Andrew's jaw dropped, but no words came out. Claire glared at him, but didn't move, trapped in her own web of failures. I stood up, my heart lighter than it had been in years. This is the end for all of us. They didn't stop me as I walked away. Back at my new apartment, I felt free for the first time. The years of pain and betrayal were over. My jewelry business was flourishing. My life was my own, and I had nothing tying me to the past anymore. A few months later, I heard rumors about Andrew and Claire. He quit his job and drained the last of his savings. She tried to find another wealthy man, but was rejected everywhere she went. They now live in what used to be my house, fighting daily in a mess of their own making. Meanwhile, I look out at the sunset from my new home, filled with hope for the future. Mom, I finally made it out. I'll live my life now, free from pain, with only hope for what lies ahead.
Husband secretly picks up unknown child, so I ask Mel to get our daughter.
I'm at work. How many times do I have to tell you? Imagine being interrupted during an important meeting by a useless woman like you. Don't call me again. The sound of the phone slamming down pierced deep into my ears. Standing in front of the preschool in the cold wind, I froze in place. The scene I had just witnessed kept replaying in my mind like a nightmare. My husband in a suit, gently holding the hand of a little boy I didn't recognize, walking out of the preschool. The moment the boy ran to him shouting, "Daddy," my blood ran cold. "Daddy?" My voice escaped as a whisper lost to the wind. Was I mistaken? Was it my imagination? It had to be. But the boy kept calling him "Daddy, Daddy" over and over, and my husband smiled back warmly. At home, he's always cold, even to our daughter, constantly preoccupied with work calls. My heart pounded violently as nausea surged up. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number. There must be an explanation. Yes, there has to be a reason. But his response came back as a sharp, dismissive yell. At the preschool gate, I had curled up, trying to avoid the gazes of the other moms passing by. Once, my husband used to come home early, making it a point to see our daughter's sleeping face every night. That kind and loving father now existed only in my memories. Weekends became filled with excuses about work, leaving family outings and dinners neglected. I wanted to confide in someone about this unease, but I couldn't tell my friends. I didn't want to worry my parents either. Then it hit me, his mother. She always said with a smile, "Thank you for taking care of my son." Surely she would be able to see through this. She'd tell me I was overthinking, that it was all a misunderstanding. Reassuring myself repeatedly, I dialed my mother-in-law's number with trembling fingers. "Hello? Hi, Emily. Could you possibly pick up my daughter from preschool tomorrow?" "Sure, no problem." Her easy agreement made my hands tremble even more. This decision would change everything. "My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old, living with David, my husband, and our 5-year-old daughter. We are a family of 3, managing work, child rearing, and housework together, or rather, I'm managing it all alone. David doesn't lift a finger when it comes to chores or parenting. I take care of everything perfectly in exchange for being allowed to keep my job. Every morning, I wake up at 5 a.m., start the laundry, and prepare lunch boxes for my husband and daughter. Today's menu: scrambled eggs, broccoli wrapped in bacon, and side dishes I have prepped beforehand. Breakfast is the leftovers from the lunch prep. Cutting corners isn't an option. Both my husband and his mother don't like the fact that I'm working. If I slacked off, who knows what they say? Plus, for me, work is essential. When my daughter Lily was born, I tried being a stay-at-home mom, but the stress of child rearing and housework confined to the home overwhelmed me. I quickly decided to look for a job. Luckily, I found my current workplace. Now it feels like my lifeline. Even with the endless tasks and limited time, I sacrifice sleep to keep working for my family. "Good morning, Mom." Lily wakes up with a smile. "Oh no, it's already this late." I rush to feed her breakfast and prepare for preschool. "What's in today's lunch?" "Today's lunch has scrambled eggs and grilled chicken." "Yay! I love grilled chicken." Her innocent enthusiasm makes this time with her precious. After dropping Lily off at preschool, I head straight to work. My hours are from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. After work, I attend a yoga class, a stress reliever funded by my paycheck. It's something just for me. I go with Nicole, the wife of my husband's direct boss. "Hi, Claire, you seem tired." "Hi, Nicole." Nicole always checks in on me, even though she's the boss's wife. She's easy to talk to, so I often open up to her. "My husband says wonderful things about your husband." "Really?" "Yes, he says your husband is an exemplary employee and role model for others." "Thank you for telling me." This kind of praise about my husband lifts my spirits. I eagerly wait for him to come home to share this with him. But lately, my husband doesn't even wake up until after Lily and I have left the house. He works flexible hours, avoiding the packed trains by going in later. As a result, he comes home late, often after Lily and I are asleep. Recently, he's been returning after the last train, leaving no chance for family time. Tonight, I stay up late to tell him about what Nicole said. "I'm home." "Welcome back. Are you hungry?" "No, I already ate." "Nicole told me something nice today." "I'm too tired. I'm going to bed." He disappears into the bedroom. I sit there disappointed. We haven't had a real conversation in ages. Lily barely even sees him anymore. The growing distance between my husband and me is hard enough. But there's also the constant interference from my mother-in-law. "Hello, Claire. It's been a while since I heard from David. And you're always so busy with work, I was getting worried." My mother-in-law always describes me as a busy person. Her words carry a subtle sting that hits my chest every time. "Oh, I'm sorry. David's been working late, and we haven't had much time to visit." "I see. Well, he's at a critical point in his career, isn't he? This is when a wife should step up and support him. If you stopped working and focused on the family, maybe I wouldn't have to worry so much." Her argument always circles back to this, that I should quit my job to support my husband. Once I tried talking to David about his mother's comments. "David, your mom doesn't seem happy that I'm working. Every time we talk, she makes snide remarks about it." Could you talk to her? You know she was an elementary school teacher, right? She worked long hours and my dad ended up having an affair. That's her trauma talking. She doesn't mean harm. It's her way of caring. David dismissed my concerns without a second thought. It felt like he was siding with her. And since then, nothing has changed. That night, I sigh heavily, closed my journal, and prepare for bed. Mom, is Dad working late again tonight? Yes, sweetie. But I made an invitation for him for my recital. Lily's preschool is hosting a recital soon. It's our final performance before moving on to elementary school. The teachers encouraged the kids to write invitations to their parents. Lily chose to write hers to her father. She said she wanted to surprise him at work so he wouldn't forget. My heart ached. It wasn't just me feeling the strain of this family dynamic. Lily was too. Determined, I resolved to remind David myself. If he still refused, I'd seek help from Nicole. The next morning, I hurriedly prepared Lily for school and dropped her off. My workday was uneventful, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Lily's words about the recital. I couldn't focus, and I ended up making a mistake at work, a rare occurrence for me. After work, I went to pick Lily up from preschool. On the way, I passed by the public elementary school and saw parents picking up their kids. A father holding hands with a boy about Lily's age caught my attention. My heart stopped. The man was David. I ducked behind a nearby pole, unable to believe what I was seeing. Dad, can we go to the park? The boy's cheerful voice echoed as David gave him a warm smile, a smile he rarely showed at home. My chest tightened, and my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't process what I was seeing. Was this a mistake? I decided to call David immediately. David, where are you right now? I'm in a meeting. Why are you calling me? I just wanted to check in. Don't call me during work. He snapped and hung up. But in the background, I clearly heard children's voices and the word Dad being called out. My hands trembled as I stared at my phone. Something was terribly wrong. For weeks now, David's behavior had been odd. I had attributed it to work stress, but now doubts began to creep in. Who was that boy? I rushed to pick up Lily, arriving late. Mom, you're late. I'm so sorry, sweetie. Something came up at work. It's okay. We can have an easy dinner tonight. Lily's thoughtfulness broke my heart. She could sense my unease and always tried to comfort me. That night, I resolved to find out the truth. The next day, I called my mother-in-law. Could you pick up Lily from preschool tomorrow and take her out for a bit? Of course, I'd love to spend time with her. My hands shook as I ended the call. This wasn't just a favor. I needed her to see what I had seen. The following day, I strategically planned to observe. I waited in a nearby cafe with a direct view of the preschool entrance. Emily arrived, cheerful and unsuspecting. Soon, David appeared, holding hands with the same boy. Emily froze in shock. David, who is that child? Mom, it's not what it looks like. Explain yourself. I stepped out of the cafe, my heart pounding. David turned pale when he saw me. I walked up to him, determined to get answers. David, who is this child? He's just a friend's kid. She asked me to pick him up because she wasn't feeling well. Don't lie to me, David. This is not normal. That's not true. I played the recording of our phone call from the previous day where I heard children's voices and the boy calling him Dad. Explain this, David. David's face hardened and he realized he'd been caught. Fine, you want the truth? This boy's the child of someone I was helping. She's a single mom going through a hard time. Helping? Is that what you call it? Helping doesn't explain this, David. Why is he calling you Dad? David hesitated, but then tried to justify his actions. She and we've been seeing each other. Her ex-husband was abusive, and I stepped in to protect her and her son. You don't understand the situation. You're right, I don't understand how you could betray your family like this. My voice trembled with rage and pain. David, I can't believe you've done this. Look, I'm not leaving her. I love her, and I love this boy. Then you can pack your things and leave. I handed him a written notice stating my intent to file for divorce and demand full custody of Lily. I will not let you drag Lily into your mess. Claire, I am so sorry. I had no idea David was doing something like this. David stood there, stunned, as I walked away, holding my head high. I needed to protect my daughter and myself from the chaos. Over the following weeks, my mother-in-law supported me as I navigated the legal process. She even confronted David, demanding he face the consequences of his actions. David lost not only his family, but also his job when his affair became public knowledge. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. Lily and I moved to a smaller apartment closer to my work, simplifying our routines and cherishing our time together. Despite everything, Lily's bright smiles reminded me of the strength I needed to carry on. Slowly but surely, we found our new normal, a life free of lies and filled with hope. Months passed and I worked tirelessly to provide a stable, loving environment for Lily. My job recognized my dedication and I was promoted to a higher position with better pay. This promotion not only improved our financial situation, but also boosted my confidence in starting anew. Lily adapted beautifully to our new routine. "Mommy, I love spending time with you." Her words warmed my heart and reminded me why I fought so hard to protect our peace. On weekends, we started new traditions, like baking cookies or having movie nights together. It wasn't always easy, but seeing Lily's happy, carefree smile made it all worthwhile. Occasionally, I received updates about David from my former mother-in-law. "Claire, David has been struggling since losing his job and his relationship. While I empathized with his challenges, I couldn't forget the pain he caused. I wished him well from a distance, but remained firm in my decision to cut ties." Meanwhile, Lily blossomed in school, making new friends and excelling in her studies. Lily's such a bright, kind-hearted child. You must be so proud of her, Claire. I was, and I told Lily that every chance I got. The support of my friend Laura and her husband became a cornerstone of my recovery. "Claire, you're doing an amazing job. If you ever need a break or someone to talk to, I'm here." Knowing I had people I could rely on gave me strength on my hardest days. Over time, I started to believe in love and trust again, not for David, but for myself. I learned to forgive myself for the doubts I'd carried during my marriage. I wasn't responsible for David's actions, and my focus now was on creating a brighter future for Lily and me. One sunny afternoon, Lily and I planted flowers in the small garden outside our apartment. "Mommy, these flowers will grow just like us, right?" I hugged her tightly, tears welling in my eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. They'll grow strong and beautiful just like us." With every passing day, I felt more grateful for the life we were building. Together, Lily and I were thriving, proving that even after the storm, the sun always finds its way back.
Terminally ill husband. The house goes to my lover. Me, okay. I rebuilt it my way. He lost it.
This mansion belongs to my husband's mistress. It's meant to be his last gift to her before he dies, and to me there is nothing left, not even a shred of respect. He sat up weakly in bed, his frail face turning toward me, a look of contempt etched deep into his expression. "There's no point in leaving anything for a useless woman like you." His words froze my heart in place. Was this really his final message to me after 10 years of marriage? "A luxurious mansion for someone like you? What a waste. The mistress is 100 times better than you." The woman sitting by the window smirked, hiding her smile behind her bright red manicured fingers. Dressed in a designer dress, she crossed her legs elegantly, observing me like I was the entertainment of the evening. A piercing pain stabbed at my chest. It felt as though I had become a mere spectacle for these two. Every single day I had visited the hospital without fail. I had helped him bathe, fed him, and stayed up late at night to fetch his painkillers. I sacrificed my own sleep, all in the hope that I might ease his suffering just a little. "Please, Ethan." My voice trembled as I spoke. One last time, I wanted to know his true feelings. He sneered and reached for the water pitcher beside his bed. He hurled it at me. Cold water splashed across my face, soaking my dress. I couldn't tell if the water running down my cheeks was for the pitcher or my own tears. "That drenched look suits you." The mistress giggled as she patted his back affectionately. Watching the two of them together, something inside me began to crumble. Perhaps I had done something wrong in our marriage. Maybe I hadn't shown my love properly or had failed to truly understand him. I clung to the thought, hoping it might explain the nightmare my life had become. With water dripping from my hair, I walked slowly toward the door. My footsteps felt heavy, as though the 10 years of memories were shackles around my ankles. Just as I stepped into the corridor, my phone vibrated. Seeing the name on the screen brought a faint smile to my lips. 5 years into our marriage, I remembered a day from my childhood. It was the day my parents divorced because of my father's infidelity. I still vividly recall the tears in my mother's eyes, her suppressed sobs as she tried not to cry in front of me. Every detail from that day was engraved in my young heart. Watching my father's back as he left our home, I clenched my small fists and vowed never to let my own family suffer the same fate. My mother worked tirelessly to raise me on her own. From early morning until late at night, she never let her exhaustion show, always greeting me with a warm smile. Her resilience inspired me, and I made a promise to myself. I would make my mother happy one day. I wanted to be as strong as she was. More than anything, I dreamed of building a warm, loving home filled with respect and care. In my dreams, I saw a small house filled with sunlight streaming into the living room. Children's laughter echoed through the space as a family gathered around a warm dinner table. In the evenings, I envisioned watching the kids play in the yard, sharing mutual respect and love with my partner. That image of an ordinary yet love-filled life became my ideal. Determined to turn that dream into reality, I resolved to never make a mistake when choosing my life partner. I swore to find someone trustworthy, someone who would never make me endure the hardships my mother had faced. That dream was the guiding light of my life. I was careful in my choice of Ethan as my husband. He spoke passionately about wanting to cherish his family, words that deeply moved me. In him, I saw a kindness and sincerity that were the opposite of my father. I truly believed my dreams were about to come true. But reality turned out to be far different from what I had imagined. I didn't realize back then how fleeting that dream would be or how painful the reality of marriage could become. Ethan, the man I had trusted, began to show his true colors soon after our engagement. Even then, I noticed hints of his unfaithfulness in his behavior. I once saw him chatting intimately with another woman at a work party. When I confronted him, he dismissed it as mere work obligations. I was uneasy, but when he said, "You're the only one for me," I convinced myself to trust him. Looking back, I now realize how naive I was. After our wedding, his behavior didn't improve. If anything, it worsened. He began spending nights away from home, claiming he was busy with work. At first, I called him constantly, worried about his well-being. Most of the time, he ignored my calls. When he finally returned home after several days, his attitude was icy. "Stop being so clingy. You're acting like I'm doing something wrong." His words made it seem as if I was the one at fault. And then one day, I found undeniable evidence of his infidelity. In the pocket of his suit jacket was a note written in delicate handwriting, clearly from another woman. The note detailed the time and place of their next meeting, ending with a small hand-drawn heart. When I confronted him, my hands trembling with anger, Ethan simply smirked. "It's not a big deal. You're blowing this out of proportion." His nonchalant attitude made it clear he had no intention of hiding his affairs. Over time, his blatant disregard for me grew more brazen. He openly canceled plans with me to spend time with his mistresses. He would leave the house, claiming he was meeting friends, only for me to discover he had been with another woman. When I confronted him, he brushed off my concerns with indifference. "It's my money. You don't get to complain about how I spend it." Ethan's words deeply hurt me, emphasizing how powerless I was in our marriage. Still, I tried to believe in him, hoping he would change. I turned a blind eye to his affairs, convincing myself that we could rebuild our bond as husband and wife. But Ethan seemed determined to destroy every effort I made to save our relationship. He began openly discussing his mistresses in front of me. "Do you even realize how loved I am? You should be grateful I chose you." Hearing those words, I felt like my heart was being crushed. The dream of a happy home I had clung to for so long completely shattered. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to file for divorce. I was held back by societal expectations and fears about life after marriage. My days became a routine of simply enduring. Then, one day, a chance encounter changed my life. An old co-worker from my days at the department store reached out to me. "Emma, you always had an eye for fashion. The clothes you selected were always the first to sell out. With your talent, you could achieve great things even now." Her words reignited a spark of hope within me. Remembering the pride I once had in my skills, I wondered if I could create something meaningful again. Knowing Ethan would dismiss my ambitions, I decided to take a leap in secret. I started a small business sourcing and selling women's clothing. My eye for quality and trends quickly gained recognition, and my business grew steadily. I secretly saved every cent I earned, depositing it into a separate account. I knew the day would come when I could leave this toxic life behind. My business gave me a newfound sense of purpose and independence. Even as I played the role of a dutiful wife at home, I was quietly building a new future for myself. One day, I received a call from my mother telling me she had been hospitalized. "Don't worry, it's nothing serious. I'll recover soon." Her voice sounded weak, and I couldn't ignore the worry in my heart. I told Ethan I needed to go see her. "Do whatever you want. I'm busy." His cold response stung, showing no concern for my mother's health or my distress. I packed my bags and left to care for my mother, suppressing the anger and disappointment I felt toward Ethan. Spending time with my mother brought me peace and clarity. Reflecting on my childhood, I realized how far I had drifted from the dreams I once cherished. My week with her passed quickly, and her recovery was faster than expected. Relieved, I decided to return home a day early. When I arrived, I found the house eerily quiet, but noticed the lights were on. As I opened the door, laughter and the sound of the TV came from the living room. I froze in place as I saw Ethan sitting on the couch with a young, fashionable woman. They were laughing, her arm casually draped over his. Ethan noticed me and jumped to his feet, visibly startled. "Weren't you supposed to come back tomorrow?" His attempt to act nonchalant was painfully obvious. I looked at him, then at the woman. "Who is she?" "She's just a colleague. We were discussing work." But I already knew. He was lying. I had seen this woman's name in his text messages, along with exchanges that were far from professional. Despite the anger bubbling inside me, I remained silent. My silence seemed to unnerve him. This was the moment I realized the future I had envisioned with him was no longer possible. The love I had poured into this marriage had been wasted. I quietly walked away, leaving Ethan calling after me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of our life together flooded my mind. I had endured so much for the sake of a family that no longer existed. By morning, I had made up my mind. The next day, I began my preparations in earnest. I sought legal advice, carefully documenting everything I needed for the divorce. At the same time, I continued building my business, ensuring financial independence. I maintained the facade of a dutiful wife, playing my part at home. But inside, I was preparing for the day I could finally walk away. Months passed, and my business flourished beyond my expectations. I opened a boutique in a prime location, quickly gaining a loyal clientele. My confidence as a professional and an individual grew stronger every day. Then one evening, Ethan's behavior took an unexpected turn. "Emma, do you need help with anything?" His sudden politeness was jarring. He began coming home earlier, speaking to me in unusually kind tones. For a moment, I wondered if he had finally changed, but my instincts told me something else was at play. A few days later, I discovered the truth. Ethan had received an ultimatum from his mistress: divorce me and gift her the house, or she would leave him. His newfound kindness was a poorly veiled attempt to manipulate me into leaving. One night, he called me to the living room with an unusually serious expression. "Emma, I have something to tell you." I sat down, watching him feign a heavy sigh before he spoke. "I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness. The doctors say I have only 3 months left to live. I've decided to give this house to someone who really deserves it, someone who has stood by me. I need you to move out immediately." His words were so outlandish, they momentarily left me speechless. My mind raced, piecing together the inconsistencies in his story. I remembered seeing a flight reservation he had made for a trip 6 months ahead. Why would someone with 3 months to live plan a vacation? The realization hit me like a wave. His terminal illness was a lie. It was just another ploy to drive me out and please his mistress. My emotions settled into an eerie calm as I listened to his fabricated sob story. This time, I wouldn't let him manipulate me. "I see. If that's what you want, I'll respect your wishes." My calm response clearly caught him off guard. The next morning, I watched him leave for work with a polite smile, concealing the storm brewing within me. As soon as he left, I set my plans into motion. I contacted contractors to begin demolishing the house. By the time Ethan returned that evening, the house was gone, reduced to an empty plot of land. The look of shock and disbelief on his face was unforgettable. "Where's my house? What have you done?" His voice rose in panic, but I simply stood there calm and composed. "This is my parting gift to you." His reaction was nothing short of theatrical, complete with flailing arms and anguished cries. The once arrogant man was reduced to a pitiful figure, shouting and stomping like a child throwing a tantrum. I watched quietly, my heart untouched by his dramatic display. By the next day, I had moved into my newly purchased apartment, starting the next chapter of my life. Meanwhile, Ethan spiraled into despair, abandoned by his mistress and left with nothing. Word spread quickly that his financial backers, including his parents, had lost their wealth. Ethan was forced to live in a small apartment, scraping by on menial jobs. The man who once held himself so high was now unrecognizable. As for me, my business continued to thrive. I built a life filled with purpose, surrounded by supportive friends and family. My mother looked at me with pride, her words filling me with warmth. "You've built a life for yourself that I always dreamed you would." Even his mistress had become an unlikely ally, and we found solace in our shared experiences. Together we forged a friendship rooted in resilience and growth. The future was bright, and the past, though painful, had made me stronger. I no longer needed to dream of happiness. It was now my reality. "I want to ask you something. Who is this woman, Mary? What is this?" Holding the envelope, my husband asked while sitting down with a sigh. Then, to my shock, he said something completely unexpected. "I wasn't trying to hide it. I want to start a new life too." For a moment, I couldn't understand what he meant. The words spun in my head, and then I finally grasped the situation. "A new life? What are you talking about? What was the last 20 years of our life for?" "She's carrying my child. I have to take responsibility." As soon as I heard those words, it felt as if my stomach had turned inside out. My legs gave out and I crumpled to the floor. Tears flowed uncontrollably. 20 years of working hard for my family, only to be betrayed in such a way. As if that wasn't enough, my mother-in-law, Susan, barged into the house. "Rachel, this is your fault." I heard her voice as soon as she entered, and it made my heart race. Still, I had no choice but to face her. "My fault?" Unable to control my emotions, I raised my voice. "Yes, it's your fault. My son wouldn't have ended up like this if you had done your duty as a wife." No wonder he turned to a younger woman. Her tone wasn't angry, it was triumphant. "Personally, I support Henry remarrying and starting a new family. He needs a fresh start." Those words broke me completely. I no longer had the strength to argue. The next day, I decided to get a divorce. Holding back tears, I knew I had to tell my sons. Looking at their faces gathered in the living room, my chest tightened. Especially the innocent eyes of my youngest made it hard to speak. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I have something important to tell you all." My voice trembled as I spoke. "Your father and I have decided to go separate ways." Right after that, my 3 sons exchanged glances. "I'm going with Dad." In that moment, it felt as though my entire life had been rendered meaningless. "Me too." One after another, they echoed the sentiment. Meanwhile, my youngest buried his face in my lap, sobbing. However, that night, everything changed. My eldest son quietly entered my room and spoke in a small voice. "Mom, don't worry. We won't betray you." What do you mean?" Calmly, he began explaining. "The 3 of us have been working together to uncover Dad's misconduct." He explained how they had contacted my father-in-law, Henry's father, who worked as the president's secretary, to investigate secretly. My youngest tracked Dad's and Mary's activities through social media, gathering evidence of the affair. "It's to protect you, Mom." Hearing that, I couldn't hold back my tears. My family hadn't fallen apart. My sons were fighting to protect me. Their plan was meticulous. They pretended to side with their father while collecting evidence to protect me in the end. Their actions gave me hope, more than anything else. A new battle was beginning. As a mother and as a family, we decided we couldn't allow ourselves to break any further. At work, my life also started to change, albeit gradually. When I was appointed as the leader of a large-scale project, I felt warmth in my chest. Hope. It was a word I hadn't thought of it in a long time. "Rachel, I'd like you to lead this project." "Me?" Half rising from my chair, I asked again in disbelief. "Yes, we need someone like you with a hands-on perspective and a calm judgment. You have enough experience, and I think you're the right person for the job." The right person, those words resonated deeply in my heart. Being needed by someone, especially in my current state, brought strength to my entire body. "Thank you. I'll do my best." I accepted the stack of documents, silently promising myself I'd succeed no matter what. As the project kicked off, life became a whirlwind. Early mornings turned into late nights filled with meetings, challenges, and problem solving. Sometimes I felt like I was caught in a bind, unable to please everyone. "Rachel, we're short on budget, and the timeline won't hold as it is." I frowned at the documents in my hands, thinking hard. Let's check with another team first. Prepare a plan B in case we can't secure extra funding. What if it still doesn't work? Then we'll find another way. Don't worry too much. Just start moving forward. Despite my encouraging words, uncertainty swirled within me. At times I felt the weight of everything on my shoulders. Still, seeing someone else giving their all ignited an odd sense of determination within me. I couldn't afford to stop. That's what I kept telling myself, running through every day. Crisis management came unexpectedly. One evening, just after wrapped up a meeting, my phone rang. Rachel, we have a problem. The client has suddenly requested changes to the design. What? The deadline is less than a week away. What should we do? First, stay calm. Let's list all the requested changes and prioritize them. Then, identify what can be standardized and delegate to the team. Understood. I'll start right away. After hanging up, I rubbed my temples, trying to suppress the mounting frustration. I began working alongside the team to quickly resolve the situation. Guiding a project meant tackling small crises head-on to keep the larger machine running. Somehow, amidst the chaos, I found motivation. The realization that I was part of something bigger kept me grounded. Someone was counting on me, and that thought kept my exhausted body moving. When I returned home that night, another vital piece of my life awaited. My youngest son ran down the hallway as soon as I opened the door. Mommy, you're home. He hugged me tightly, and I couldn't help but smile as I stroked his hair. Were you waiting for me? Yes, today I drew something at school. Look. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his backpack, proudly showing me a colorful crayon drawing. It was a picture of the two of us holding hands. Is this me? Yep, and you're smiling. His innocent grin melted away all the tension and exhaustion from the office. I knelt down and held his small hand tightly. Thank you. It makes me so happy. Should we put it up? Really? Yay! Evening routines, dinner, bath time, and tucking him into bed became precious moments I cherished. His small hand grip in mine lightened my shoulders and eased my mind. Mommy, was work hard today? Yes, but seeing your smile makes me feel better right away. I'm Mommy's energy booster, right? That's right. You're my #1 energy booster. However, even that little happiness was fleeting. One day at the office while reviewing some documents, a commotion erupted at the entrance. Where's Rachel? The sharp voice pierced through the air. My body froze as I recognized the voice immediately. It was my mother-in-law. She stormed into the office, her eyes scanning the room until they locked onto me. There you are. She marched straight toward me, ignoring the startled stares of my colleagues. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? I should ask you the same. She shouted loud enough for the entire office to hear. This woman is an unfit mother. The room fell silent and every eye was on me. Her accusations grew louder and more pointed, attacking my character. Please, this is my workplace. Let's discuss this elsewhere. Workplace or not, the truth needs to come out. My colleagues' whispers began to sting, and I felt utterly exposed. The tension in the office was unbearable, and I could feel my reputation crumbling with every word she spoke. Do you know how much Henry has suffered because of you? It's your fault. He had no choice but to cheat. Her voice echoed through the office as I desperately tried to calm her down. Please, let's not discuss this here. You need to take responsibility for what you've done. My colleagues exchanged glances, some whispering behind their hands. I stood frozen, unable to respond. From that day forward, my life at work changed drastically. I was removed as the project leader and reassigned to a desk by the window, far from the main team. My colleagues avoided me, their conversations halting whenever I approached. The once welcoming workplace became suffocating. Even simple interactions felt like walking on thin ice. One day I gathered my courage to approach Brian, a colleague who used to invite me to lunch. Brian, do you have a moment? He paused briefly, avoiding eye contact. Sorry, I'm in a hurry. Maybe another time. That another time never came. The isolation was suffocating. In the break room, I overheard two colleagues whispering about me. Do you think Rachel is okay? Her mother-in-law made such a scene. Well, they say where there's smoke, there's fire. Their words cut deep, but I clenched my fists under the table, choosing silence. That evening, as the office emptied, I stayed late organizing papers to distract myself from the growing despair. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I felt tears welling up. At home, my youngest son's warm hug was my only solace. One night, the doorbell rang unexpectedly after midnight. Peering through the peephole, I saw my mother-in-law standing there, her face twisted with rage. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Before I could finish, she pushed the door open. "This is all your fault." Her voice shook with anger as she stormed into my home, accusing me of sabotaging Henry's career. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, don't play innocent. You used a private investigator to expose him." Her words made no sense, and I tried to deny the accusations, but she refused to listen. She eventually left, leaving me shaken and confused. A few days later, I received a call from my former boss. "I'm sorry, but you'll need to step away from your work temporarily." I was officially suspended, and the walls seemed to close in. That evening, my sons gathered around me with determined expressions. "Mom, we have something to show you." They played a recording of a secret meeting between my mother-in-law and a company official. "Make sure Rachel takes the fall for everything. We need to protect Henry's reputation." Hearing her plotting to ruin me left me speechless. My sons vowed to expose the truth and clear my name. Their courage gave me strength, and the evidence they provided led to an investigation. My mother-in-law's arrest was broadcast on the news, and her once pristine reputation crumbled overnight. The fallout from her actions rippled through her personal and professional life. The investigation revealed the extent of my mother-in-law's manipulation and false accusations. The evidence my sons provided cleared my name completely. News of Susan's arrest spread quickly, and she became the subject of public ridicule. Former colleagues, students, and members of the community condemned her actions. My ex-husband visited me unexpectedly after the news broke. "Why are you here?" I don't know what to say anymore." He looked tired, his face etched with regret. "She destroyed everything. My career, my reputation. But in the end, I blame myself." His words carried a mixture of guilt and resignation. "She believed she was helping you, but her actions caused so much pain." He nodded silently, unable to meet my gaze. "I've decided to cut ties with her completely. It's the only way I can start over." His resolve seemed genuine, but I knew his journey would be a lonely one. After her arrest, my mother-in-law was sentenced and spent her days in isolation. My ex-husband, estranged from her, focused on rebuilding his life but faced many challenges. Meanwhile, my career took an unexpected turn for the better. My company formally apologized for the injustice I had suffered. "Rachel, we owe you a great deal. Your resilience has been remarkable." I was given a new project, and with it came a promotion to management. The success of the project restored my reputation and confidence. "Congratulations, Rachel. You really deserve this." As my professional life flourished, my personal life also began to heal. My sons were my greatest supporters, their love and determination bringing us closer as a family. "Mom, you've shown us what a real strength looks like." Those words filled me with pride and gratitude. We rebuilt our lives together, creating a bond stronger than ever before. I learned to let go of the pain and focus on the future, cherishing every moment with my children. The past no longer held me captive. With a renewed sense of purpose, I embraced the challenges ahead, knowing that I was capable of overcoming anything. My journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace.
Husband with 2 months to live. I'm leaving the house and inheritance to our son, not you. Me. Fine, then let's divorce. Husband. What?
My husband, Brian, was diagnosed with throat cancer and told me he only had 2 months to live. He had always acted like a domineering husband, completely ignoring my opinions and living life as he pleased. The fact that he ruined his health is nothing but his own fault. Yet I couldn't ignore the emotional ties formed over the years we spent together. So I decided to care for him until the end. However, my resolve was mocked by Brian's escalating selfishness. Even though he couldn't go to the bathroom by himself, he constantly hurled insults at me instead of asking for help properly. His communication was growing weaker and weaker, but he still insisted on trying to dominate me. One day, when he could no longer speak, he sent me a text message. "I'm giving the house and all my assets to our son, not you. Are you okay with that?" Did he expect me to cry, beg, or lose my composure? Brian always used to say, "This is just how women are," as if dismissing my emotions. But I wasn't reliant on his meager finances to support my life. I replied with a simple answer. Fine, let's divorce. Brian looked shocked, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe what I had just said. My name is Mary James, and I'm 61 years old. I currently work part-time 5 days a week, full of energy. Brian was an ordinary office worker who earned slightly more than the national average salary. But his excessive spending habits meant we couldn't save much. He was a heavy smoker and drank copious amounts of alcohol every night. No matter how much I begged him to consider his health and take some alcohol-free days, he never listened. While ruining his own health was his choice, financial strain it caused was a burden I had to bear. With no savings set aside for retirement, our future looked bleak. Seeing this coming, I started working full-time as a part-time worker when I turned 50. I didn't tell Brian how much I earned because I knew he would demand money for cigarettes and alcohol. Instead, I quietly saved money for our son and made excuses when he asked for money, saying the savings were tied up in household expenses. Brian called me stingy, but I didn't care. Brian was to blame for his financial recklessness, spending every last yen on cigarettes and alcohol. Over the past 10 years, I saved money, not for Brian, but for my own future. I planned to leave this house by my 60s, using the money I had painstakingly set aside. During the day, I worked at a deli, preparing food and serving customers. At night, I took on freelance work from home. I considered a divorce, but couldn't go through with it immediately because of my son Henry. Henry, now 36, was unemployed and living at home, almost completely withdrawn from society. He had been a recluse since high school when he started skipping school, barely graduating due to his low attendance. He didn't suffer bullying or abuse. He simply claimed the lively and energetic atmosphere of school didn't suit him. His homeroom teacher was understanding and tried to help him adjust, but Henry never fully reintegrated. Academics didn't interest him, and since he didn't study at home, he couldn't get into college. Brian and I wanted him to pursue higher education, but Henry dismissed the idea, saying it was too much trouble and that he didn't want to go. He started as a part-time worker, but that didn't even last. Soon, the only time he left the house was to visit the nearest convenience store. When we pressured him to find a job, he tried but was fired within a year. After that, he occasionally worked short-term gigs, but that was the extent of his efforts. Brian tried to rationalize the situation. At least he's doing something. It could be worse. But I knew the truth. This wasn't sustainable. Henry's future seemed destined for what's known as the 80-50 problem. This term describes elderly parents in their 80s financially supporting their unemployed children in their 50s. It was a horrifying thought. Picture this: 2 frail 80-year-old parents taking care of a 50-year-old child with no income, who has no interest in caregiving or contributing to the household. Adding to the burden, this adult child expects their parents to continue supporting them financially. I read that people who become reclusive often struggle with feelings of inferiority or past failures. Perhaps Henry was no different, so I tried to approach him with patience and understanding. I avoided outright criticism, hoping to create a positive environment at home. I engaged in hobbies and sought joy in life, believing a happier household could improve everyone's mood. When I learned that both excessive interference and neglect could worsen his condition, I adjusted my behavior accordingly. Yet, despite my efforts, Henry and Brian grew increasingly lazy. "Since you're working, I don't need to. As long as Mom takes care of us, there's no problem." They became entirely dependent on me. They expected me not to only earn money, but also handle all household chores. The thought of how long this situation might last was overwhelming. If it were a temporary phase, I could endure it. But year after year, nothing changed. Brian's health began deteriorating before he could reach retirement age, and he quit his job. This left me as the sole breadwinner, making it impossible to save much or plan for my future. Meanwhile, Henry showed no signs of improvement, refusing every job opportunity I introduced. Henry dismissed jobs for various reasons. They were too far, too tiring, or didn't pay enough. Occasionally, he found day labor jobs, but one day of work seemed to make him feel like he had worked for years. Afterward, he would do nothing for months. It's said that pushing reclusive individuals too hard can backfire, but my patience wore thin. Henry didn't appear to be struggling emotionally. He seemed comfortable with his dependence on us. At times, I couldn't help but scold him. "You need to stand on your own 2 feet. We're getting older, and we can't take care of you forever." Henry, however, played the victim. "It's your fault for raising me this way. You're a cold, unloving parent." His accusations made me question my parenting, but I started to think differently. I had supported Henry for nearly 20 years, and I began to believe that my responsibility ended there. As a parent, I had provided food, shelter, and care. Beyond that, Henry's future was no longer my responsibility. When I read about the increasing number of middle-aged adults who remain unemployed and dependent on their parents, I saw Henry in those statistics. Brian seemed to enjoy Henry's company, treating him as a drinking buddy. The two of them would sit together at night, drinking and laughing, while I worked to keep the household afloat. Their shared dependency on me drained my energy and spirit. Despite everything, I still felt obligated to help them. My hope of leaving the household began to feel like an impossible dream. However, life threw us a curveball. Brian, whose health had been declining, received a grim diagnosis: throat cancer. His symptoms began with a hoarse voice and difficulty swallowing. At first, I thought it was a cold or inflamed tonsils and advised him to rest. But the symptoms persisted, and he developed a lump in his neck. Eventually, he began coughing up blood, prompting me to insist on a hospital visit. The diagnosis was devastating: late-stage throat cancer that had already spread to the lymph nodes. The doctor explained that Brian's years of smoking and drinking were likely the cause. His prognosis was grim: 6 months with treatment, 2 months without. The news crushed any remaining strength in Brian. When told he would need to quit smoking and drinking, he refused. "What's the point of living longer if I can't enjoy myself?" He declined hospital admission, opting for home care instead, which significantly increased my burden. I applied for caregiving support and managed to get assistance through a care manager. Still, the bulk of the work fell on me, balancing my job, housework, and now caregiving. Brian became more irritable and demanding as his health deteriorated. "You're terrible at this. Call Henry. Have him buy me some liquor." Henry, of course, was no help. Instead, he added to my stress with his constant demands for food and allowances. The more Brian's condition worsened, the more he lashed out. My nights were sleepless as I tended to his needs, only to face his ungratefulness and hostility. One day, he sent me a text message. His message didn't hurt me as he probably intended. I had already decided that I didn't need his meager savings or this old house. I walked into his room and responded clearly: "Fine, let's get a divorce." Brian's eyes widened in shock, unable to believe my calm response. He had expected me to cry, beg, or show any reaction that would affirm his control over me. But after years of enduring his selfishness, I no longer felt bound by his manipulative behavior. My decision to stand firm shocked him, leaving him speechless. I continued my explanation without flinching. "I've had enough. You want to leave everything to Henry? Go ahead." Brian fumbled to pick up his phone, attempting to type a reply, but his weak hands caused it to fall to the floor. I bent down, picked it up, and handed it back to him. He typed furiously, his anger evident, even without words. "You're okay with being kicked out of this house? If you're not, start taking better care of me." His messages were filled with threats and attempts to manipulate me further. Despite his illness, he still prioritized his need for control over genuine gratitude or reconciliation. I no longer cared about his money, the house, or his approval. What I wanted was freedom from his tyranny and from the toxic cycle he and Henry perpetuated. I calmly explained my next steps. "I'll make the necessary arrangements to move you into a care facility. Henry can have the house as you wish, but I'm leaving." Brian's expression turned panicked. He had never imagined I would act on his words, let alone leave him behind. But his pride wouldn't let him apologize or ask me to stay. I contacted the social worker and care manager to finalize his admission to a hospice. At the same time, I arranged for Henry to be taken to a rehabilitation program for adults struggling with isolation. Brian's illness reached its final stages. Yet, even on his deathbed, he refused to acknowledge his wrongs or show gratitude. Instead, he clung to his pride, drafting a will that excluded me from anything beyond the legally required inheritance portion. In his will, he wrote humiliating terms for me, stating that Henry would have the authority to evict me if I returned to the house. It was a petty act of defiance, proving that he never saw me as an equal partner in our marriage. His actions only solidified my resolve to leave and never look back. I filed for divorce and presented him with the paperwork. He signed it with shaky hands, his gaze filled with bitterness rather than remorse. I submitted the divorce papers and informed him of the finalized separation. It's done. You've left everything to Henry, just as you wanted. Now take care of yourself in the hospice. Brian's face fell, finally realizing that his attempts to manipulate me had failed. After his admission to hospice care, I focused on arranging Henry's transfer to a rehabilitation center. He resisted fiercely, claiming that I was abandoning him. "You're an unfit mother. You're heartless." Despite his anger, I knew this was the best decision for him. At the rehabilitation center, Henry was introduced to basic life skills and routines he had avoided for years. He learned to wake up early, clean, cook, and communicate respectfully with others. Slowly but surely, he began to adapt. A year later, I received a letter from Henry. "Mom, I'm doing well. This past year has been the most meaningful one of my life. I've started a part-time job and am learning to live independently." Tears welled in my eyes as I read his words. After decades of struggle, Henry was finally finding his footing. Meanwhile, I continued to enjoy my newfound freedom. I lived a peaceful, independent life, free from the burdens of the past. Occasionally, I visited my ex-husband's resting place, reflecting on the lessons learned and the growth I witnessed in Henry. My journey wasn't without pain, but it led to a future where I could live authentically and without regret. Next story. You've probably never been to such a fancy restaurant before. Make sure to savor every bite. You probably won't get another chance to come here. Rachel, you shouldn't say things like that. But it's the truth. At a blind date set up by my well-meaning yet pushy boss, I found myself being looked down on by the other family. And regretting that I didn't refuse the setup from the start, I sat there awkwardly. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 25 years old. I've been working in the administrative department of a large trading company for 3 years since graduating from college. My boss, Sonia Mitchell, is in her mid-40s and has an unmatched penchant for helping people. She's a dedicated mentor who taught me everything I know about work and is a warm, affable person. Sonia is married and has 3 sons, yet she balances her career effortlessly. Thanks to her guidance, I've been able to handle my job without much trouble. However, there's one problem I have with her. Her desire to play matchmaker goes beyond the workplace. It seems to have become her hobby. She's constantly setting up blind dates for her single employees. Apparently, many employees owe their happy marriages to Sonia's matchmaking skills. That's also something she takes great pride in. While many are grateful for her efforts, I wasn't interested in marriage yet. I hope to avoid becoming the next target of her matchmaking schemes. But my turn finally came. "Rachel, I have some wonderful news for you." She beamed at me as she spoke, and I couldn't help but think, it's finally my turn. "Miss Mitchell, I'm really focused on my career right now. I don't think I'm ready for marriage yet." "That's no problem at all. You can keep working even after you're married. This company supports working women. You don't need to worry about a thing. Look at me. I'm married with kids and still active in my career." "Well, that's true, but you never know where you're going to find the right person. This might be your one chance to meet them. If it doesn't work out, you can just say no. There's no need to stress about it." I felt conflicted. On one hand, I respected her and knew she meant well. On the other hand, I didn't want to go through with it. But I couldn't refuse her outright. In the end, I reluctantly agreed. When I told my mom about the setup, she seemed oddly excited. A blind date? That sounds so exciting. Why are you so thrilled about this? Well, it might mean you'll get married. Are you saying you want me to move out already? Of course not. I just want to see you in a beautiful wedding dress. You're gorgeous just like me. You'll be stunning as a bride. My mom's optimism was unrelenting. My father had passed away from illness when I was in middle school. Despite the loss, my mom raised me on her own without remarrying. She always kept her spirits high and never showed sadness in front of me. Her laughter and positivity helped me cope with my dad's absence. So, what's he like? Do you have a picture? Yeah, here. I held up my phone, showing her the picture Miss Mitchell had sent. Oh, people use phone pictures for blind dates now? Apparently fewer people go for professional photos these days. He seems decent enough. I don't know. He looks kind of timid to me. What does he do for work? He's the only son of a real estate family, I think. I didn't know much else. Miss Mitchell said it was a casual meeting, so I didn't ask too many questions. What should you wear? My mom seemed more invested in this than I was. 2 weeks later, we arrived at the designated restaurant. It was a private room, and the other family was already there when we arrived. We were 15 minutes early, so we weren't late. Yet as soon as we walked in, I was greeted with hostility by Nick, Mr. Lewis. Arriving after us? How rude. I'm terribly sorry. I thought we were early enough. Well, that's what happens with single mothers. No manners or proper upbringing. His tone was condescending. He scanned my mom and me from head to toe with a look of disdain. The son, Andrew, didn't say much, but his gaze felt unsettling. We're in real estate, you know. Our properties generate rental income without us lifting a finger. That's right. We make over $200,000 a year just by sitting around. Oh, I see. That's all you have to say? Most people would be amazed. You should at least say, wow, that's impressive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this really how people acted on blind dates? I glanced at my mom. She sipped her tea calmly, as if none of this bothered her. My mom had faced her share of struggles raising me alone. She was used to being looked down on for being a single mother. She always brushed it off with a smile. Andrew insisted on this meeting because he saw your picture. Mommy, she's even prettier than the photo. I froze, hearing him call his mother Mommy at the age of 30. His face turned red as he looked at me with a creepy smile. I forced a polite smile, but my discomfort was growing. You smiled at me, right? I feel the same way about you. We're a perfect match. His grin widened unnaturally, making me feel even more uneasy. I looked at my mom, hoping she'd rescue me. But she was already sampling the food, seemingly unbothered. Rachel, you should eat. The food is exceptional. My mom complimented the chef, ignoring the awkward atmosphere. Of course, this is a high-end restaurant, not like the diners and casual places you're probably used to. We dine here regularly, unlike you. The conversation quickly turned into a string of boasts about their wealth. So, what's your salary? Mine? Your mother probably works a part-time job at a supermarket or something. Typical for single mothers, I suppose. His assumptions were infuriating, but I kept my composure. I earn about $3,000 a month after taxes. $3,000? That's less than Andrew's monthly allowance. Don't worry, Rachel. My parents cover my expenses, so you won't have to. Andrew, you're so considerate. By the way, how much debt do you have? I assume you paid for college with student loans. I could feel my patience snapping. My head filled with thoughts of snapping back, but I restrained myself. I owed Miss Mitchell too much to cause a scene. Rachel, let's enjoy the meal. The chef worked hard on this. My mom's calmness made me realize she was also angry but hiding it well. I, however, had lost my appetite. The food tasted bland, and I wanted the meeting to end. Wait a minute. Did you just call me unpleasant? I didn't say that. But I can assure you, it wasn't about my daughter. My mom set down her utensils, her expression growing serious. Do you even realize the favor we're doing you by inviting you here? You should be thanking us for letting you experience a high-class restaurant. Exactly. You're from a household earning $3,000 a month. You can't even comprehend our lifestyle. My mom's calm demeanor changed. That's enough. I only eat what's made with care, and I refuse to waste a single bite. Nick slammed his napkin on the table. This meeting is over. He stood abruptly, followed by Mrs. Lewis. Andrew looked panicked, his face pale. Wait, Mom, Dad, I like her. She looks just like my favorite doll. His words sent chills down my spine. Don't worry, Andrew. We'll find someone more suitable for you. Surprisingly, I felt relieved hearing that. All I wanted was for this nightmare to end. Just as the Lewis family prepared to leave, my mom suddenly started laughing. The sound caught everyone off guard, including me. What's so funny? Oh, nothing. I just wanted to reassure you. We don't look down on people who only earn $200,000 a year. My mom's smile was sharp, her tone light, but laced with sarcasm. The Lewis family froze, clearly confused and irritated. My mom took a sip of water, her calmness unwavering. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, Mr. Lewis broke the silence. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. I was simply being polite. The truth about my mother was about to come to light. My late father was a businessman who founded multiple successful ventures. When he passed away, my mom took over. Despite initial challenges as a woman in leadership, she thrived. Her hard work turned my father's dreams into reality. One of those dreams was owning a restaurant. This very establishment was one of her success stories. Unbeknownst to the Lewis family, my mom was their host today. The head chef entered the room at that moment. Excuse me, how was everything? Did you enjoy the meal? He directed his question toward my mom. Oh, the food was wonderful, of course, but please, no need to address her. Clearly you're mistaken about who's in charge here. The chef looked puzzled, then turned to my mom. Madam, as always, it's a pleasure to have you dining with us. The Lewis's family's jaws collectively dropped. We owe everything to your support and leadership. The silence was deafening. Wait, what? You know her? Of course. This restaurant is part of the Hope Group, but she leads. My mom offered a gracious smile, clearly unbothered by their reaction. Oh, please. I'm just a supporter of great talent like our chef here. The Lewis family looked visibly shaken. Mr. Lewis finally muttered something about a misunderstanding. They made a hasty exit, leaving behind an awkward silence. Shall I bring dessert for you two? That would be lovely. The chef left, and my mom turned to me, her expression soft again. Well, that was entertaining. I couldn't help but laugh, feeling grateful for my mom's unwavering strength. After the Lewis family left, the atmosphere in the room lightened considerably. My mom and I enjoyed our desserts in peace, the tension of the earlier meeting dissipating. You know, these situations are exactly why I always remind you to stay grounded. People like them thrive on appearances and status. I nodded, reflecting on how my mom handled the situation with such poise. A few days later, I shared the story with my boss, Sonia. Oh my goodness, I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Rachel. If I had known the kind of people they were, I would have never introduced them. I assured her it was fine. The incident, while unpleasant, had taught me a lot about standing up for myself. The Lewis family didn't contact us again, probably embarrassed about their behavior. They officially declined the match, claiming I wasn't a good fit for their son. Mom and I found the response laughable, given how the meeting had ended. Life returned to normal, but the story of the disastrous meeting stayed with me. Several months later, I heard through the grapevine that the Lewis family's real estate business had encountered serious legal trouble. One of their buildings had been discovered to have serious structural issues. The resulting lawsuits and financial losses forced them to sell off their properties. Meanwhile, my life continued to improve. 2 years after the disastrous meeting, Sonia introduced me to another match. This time, It was with someone kind, respectful, and humble. To my surprise, we hit it off immediately. A year later, we got married. My mom was overjoyed, and so was I. Looking back, that disastrous meeting with the Lewis family had been a blessing in disguise. It had taught me to value myself and helped me find someone truly worthy of my time.